Okay, assalamu alaikum. I hope you're all well. Gonna have a quick sound check to make sure I'm not speaking to space. Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad Hassan. Good to see you. Nobody else in the chat, just you and me. There we go. Since view count is up to 6. So assalamu alaikum everyone, and good to see you back with me, and happy new year, and inshallah I hope that the next year for you is full of blessings and barakah, and you get the best out of it, and you make it through the inevitable trials that will come our way during the next year. May Allah give us patience and taqwa to go through them. Ameen. All right, okay. So, what do I have today for you? So, last week we spoke a little bit about the verse, which is أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. That will they not ponder the Quran, and the result of that pondering, you will see that if it had been from other than God, you would have found in it, contradictions aplenty within it. So within itself. So we're not talking about from outside of itself, all right? Like the way they say, scientific errors in the Quran and stuff like that. No, our science is constantly changing. Our understanding of history is constantly changing. So God is not going to tell us to falsify the Quran by our own knowledge of things which are developing. If for 500 years people have a wrong view of history and think that their view of history or science is fact, and then they compare with the Quran, they say, okay, look, the Quran is wrong here. Well, though that's 500 years of people, having the wrong view of the Quran because their own knowledge of history or of science was wrong. Okay, so no, when the Quran talks about they would have found within it, it really means within it. Okay, within it, many contradictions. So we talked about that a little bit last time, and I said that this week I'm going to share a few verses, a couple of verses which I'm still trying to puzzle out. One of them does revolve around history, one revolves around polemics, but I'm trying to understand them myself. So let me share the presentation and we can get to that, and then I'll try to get some callers in. I think that looks okay, right? Where is it? Okay, here we are. I have to go to the right tab. Okay, so the two solved I wrote here. The title really is two unsolved verses for me, right? So they're solved somewhere, but for me, they're not solved. I forgot to add the second one over here, but we'll get to it in a minute. So the first one, and this is going to be a very quick presentation from my side because, like I said, I want to try and keep these shorter. So the first one is this one. It's in Surah Al-Ma'idah. So it's one of the last. It is actually the last surah to be revealed, by broad consensus. The one before it is Surah At-Tawbah, Surah 9. So in this verse, وإذ قال موسى لقومه يا قوم اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ جعل فيكم أنبياء وجعلكم ملوكا وآتاكم من لم يؤت أحدا من العالمين. And recall when Moses said to his people, "O my people, remember the favor of Allah upon you when He appointed among you." So it says in Arabic, جعل فيكم, or He made in you, among you, prophets, and made you kings. وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا, and gave you that which He had not given anyone among the worlds. So what's the issue of this verse? So the question I have, or the issue I have, which I'm making these two. I'm hoping that somebody somewhere, some of you watching, or maybe you could ask somebody else if any of you have an answer to this. But basically, when this verse says that Moses is saying to them, to Bani Israel, وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا. Now, the interesting thing, which I noticed actually while preparing these slides, is of course here it says, جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ أَنْبِيَاءَ. He made um, in you or among you, جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ. So in you, right? Prophets. So among you are prophets. Okay. Now you'd expect the next one to say وَجَعَلَ فِيكُم مُلُوكًا, and he made in you as well فِيكُم مُلُوكًا. But instead it says وَجَعَلَكُم مُلُوكًا, and he made you kings. Right? And he made you kings. I'm not sure what to make of that difference, where one of them says جَعَلَ فِيكُم and the other one just says جَعَلَكُم. But the point is that the question that I have is, when were Bani Israel kings, or when did they have kings before Moses? As far as I know, they never had any, right? So the thing about the Quran, of course, doesn't give like the history as a timeline, right? There is, I know, I remember when Mufti Abu Layth, he made those, and he put forward those theories about Akhenaten being Moses, right? And a few other ideas about that. I mean, could that be related to that? I'm not sure, but he put forward that, and then said that this other guy would have been Suleiman then, because Suleiman is said to have such a huge kingdom. So who was that? Meno, I forget. I can't pronounce those Egyptian pharaoh names, but this other guy was supposed to be Suleiman. But if you look at the sort of the timeline as it's given in the Quran, it doesn't match up to what he was saying, I don't think. But anyway, the general timeline is, of course, you have Ben Israel starts from Israel, Yaqub, right? Yaqub ibn Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, right? So Yaqub has his sons, none of them were kings. So Yaqub himself was not a king. Then he has his sons. They weren't kings, but you had, of course, Yusuf, who went off into Egypt, who was taken into Egypt, and he worked for a king, but he wasn't a king, right? He worked for a king, and then Ben Israel are brought into Egypt by Yusuf, and they settle there. Okay, and then the next thing we have in the Quran is the mu'min of Ali Fir'aun. So the believer from the family of Fir'aun in that surah, in Surah Al-Ghafir, where that believer mentions about how Yusuf was among you. That's the only other time really Yusuf is mentioned in the Quran, right? Apart from Surah Yusuf, you have the whole surah about him. And you have this other time in Surah Al-Ghafir where they're talking about that moment is saying, you had Yusuf among you, and you did not cease doubting in what he brought you until after he died. You said God would not raise another messenger after him, another prophet after him. And he's speaking then, okay, of course, at the time of Moses, because he's speaking up, trying to convince his people of Moses as a messenger of God. So that clearly shows that between Yusuf and Musa, that there were no prophets, certainly. But there also doesn't seem to have been any kings, right? Because they went into servitude, right? They were slaves, but in Israel. So up to Musa's time, I don't see where is it that Ben Israel had kings. Between Israel himself, the founding father of Israel, and Moses, when did Ben Israel have kings? When were they kings? I mean, that's what it says. Some of the translations, of course, they don't say that. They put in the translation of this verse, they say, and gave you and made you possessors, right? They put here that he made among you prophets and made you possessors. وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا. And you could put that in that kind of way, that muluk, a king is somebody who possesses things. But really the word muluk is the plural for kings, right? That's the first meaning that comes to mind. Just give me a second. Okay, so that's the first verse that I would like anybody anywhere who has any clarity to way of clarifying it. Maybe they could help us out. So maybe this is hinting at something because we have very little historical knowledge of Bani Israel, right? We don't know much about them. This could be and ends up being one of the quote unquote historical miracles of the Quran. Because right now, as far as I know, that between Moses and um, is Yaqub, there were no kings among Ben Israel. I don't think even Ben Israel say that themselves. I'm not sure. So, it could end up being discovered and no, through some historical record somewhere that no, there were kings among them. Some of them were kings. And that would be a great confirmation of the Quran. But either way, like I said before, when we talk about contradictions, quote unquote, of the Quran, we are not talking about contradictions of the Quran with outside knowledge, like our understanding of history or science. We're talking about within itself. Within itself. Okay. Now, within itself, doesn't really seem like there's a problem of there being kings between Moses and Yaqub. Okay. The Quran is saying there were, it seems to me, um, but that's not contradicted by anything else in the Quran. It's not really contradicted by anything else, right? Because there were definitely prophets, right, between Israel and Moses. So you had, after Yaqub, you have Yusuf, Moses, and Harun. So all three of those were prophets. Okay, so جعلكم جعل فيكم أنبياء. He made among you prophets. But where do kings come in? That's what I would like to know. The second verse is more of a polemical that I want to talk about. It's this one. It's a long verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ومن أظلم ممن افترى على الله كذبا. And who is more unjust than the one who invents a lie against God? And that is the biggest sin in the Quran. It's not shirk. Shirk is not the biggest sin in the Quran. Shirk is ظلم عظيم. It's a great sin. But this is أظلم. This is in the superlative. Okay. Than one who invents a lie against God. Now, this is mentioned many times in the Quran, that same phrase, and then something else sometimes is added to it, as if that's something which is a continuation of this. Okay, but then it says, أو قال أوحي إلي ولم يوحى إليه شيء, or says it has been revealed to me, inspired to me, but nothing was revealed or inspired to him. Okay, of course not, because that's definitely a lie against God. But the next phrase is the one which I want to talk about, which says, وَمَنْ قَالَ سَأُنزِلُ مِثْلَ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ, or the one who says, I will send down like what God has sent down. Just give me a second. Okay, so it says, وَمَنْ قَالَ سَأُنزِلُ مِثْلَ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ. And the rest of the verse is not really as relevant to what I want to say, or it could be, I'm not sure. The rest of the verse talks about وَلَوْ تَرَى إِذِ الظَّالِمُونَ فِي غَمَرَاتِ الْمَوْتِ, and if you see when the unjust are in the throngs of death, وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ بَاسِطُو أَيْدِيهِمْ, and the angels are stretching forth their hands, saying, bring out yourselves, this day you shall be recompensated with the punishment of humiliation, because you used to say upon God what is not true. وَكُنْتُمْ بِأَحْنَ آيَاتِهِ مُسْتَكْبِرِينَ, you were arrogant against his verses. Let me just read the English. And who is more unjust than one who invents a lie about Allah, or says, it has been inspired to me, while nothing has been inspired to him, and one who says, I will reveal something like what Allah has revealed. And if you could but see when the wrongdoers are in the overwhelming pangs of death, while the angels extend their hands, saying, discharge your souls, today you will be awarded the punishment of external humiliation for what you used to say against Allah other than the truth, and that you were towards his verses being arrogant. Okay, so what's the issue with these verses, or specifically with this phrase here? So somebody here is being quoted as saying, I will send down something like what Allah has revealed. This is something the person is saying this, and the person who says this is being portrayed in this verse as one of the Azlam, one of the most unjust, saying that he will do this. Now he hasn't, according to this verse, he hasn't done it, but he's saying he's going to do it, and he's saying he's going to do it, and he has that intention. So what's the issue? The issue, of course, is that why is the one who says that he or she will reveal like what Allah has revealed? Why is that put together with the most unjust? when to bring like what Allah has brought is actually a challenge in the Quran. So the Quran is actually challenging people to do it, right? It says when إن كنتم في ريب ما أنزلنا على عبدنا فأتوا بسورة من مثله, right? If you are in doubt as to what was revealed to our servant, then bring the like thereof, okay? Or in another verse, bring 10 surahs invented like it. Or in another verse, if all of man, if قل لئن اجتمعت الإنس والجن على أن يأتوا بمثل هذا القرآن لا يأتون بمثله. If all of mankind and all of jinn got together so that they could bring the like of this Quran, they wouldn't be able to, even if both camps started to help each other, the jinn and the men. They started to help each other, they would not be able to bring the like of this Quran. So that's put forward as a challenge. So why would it be unjust for somebody to say that they are going to try to do the challenge, right? To take up the challenge. So that's what the verse sort of reads like to me, right? ومن قال سأنزل سأنزل مثل ما أنزل الله. Now it could be that this is the part which is mentioned. سأنزل مثل ما أنزل الله. Rather than he doesn't say سأنزل, right? I will send down like what I will bring down what God has brought down. It's like he's saying I'm going to force it down. I'm going to make it to come down. That could be part of the answer of that, but I'm not sure. So I just thought I'd put this out for anybody who would like to, you know, contemplate those verses and maybe help me, provide me with some answers um, to them. So I just wanted to point out, I put this in the chat that you can see. I've actually talked a lot about this, the Quran's challenge, a surah like it, to bring forth a surah like it. I've made a Reddit post about that where I put like a guide for how somebody could go about completing the Quran's challenge. So, I put in at the end of it, especially like a word bank, which in my opinion, these are like phrases because they're so often repeated in the Quran. Anybody who wants to make a surah like the Quran, they can use any of these phrases. They can of course use the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim at the beginning because all the surahs start like that. So, of course, if somebody is going to invent a surah, they should start it with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, right? Phrases like, Inna Allah Ghafur Rahim, truly God is forgiving, merciful. Anything which is often repeated in the Quran, I think it can be used in somebody's, making of a surah. A bunch of other things. You can see the post yourself. I mean, one of the things I said is you could rehash the story of Musa again, right? The story of Musa is mentioned so many times in the Quran, right? Somebody could make another surah with the story of Musa in it again. Why not? Or maybe one of the stories which is not mentioned many times in the Quran. Maybe the story of Yusuf himself could be done again in a smaller surah. Whoever wants to have a go at the Quran's challenge. But anyway, those are the verses that I wanted to speak about today, which for me are sort of those issues in them are unsolved. So this issue about why such a person would be called among the unjust, when this is the Quran's challenge to actually do this. And the other one is with Bani Israel. When were Bani Israel kings, or when did they have kings before Musa? So that's basically it. All right, let me get back to the stream. Assalamu alaikum. Let me just check the chats. Assalamu alaikum, perfect dawah. Good to have you again. Sam from the UK. Assalamu alaikum. Amazing. Good to have you all. I don't have anybody backstage, so if anybody wants to come on, you're more than welcome. And repeat, Happy New Year to all of you. So does anybody have any ideas about these verses? And is anybody trying to come on? Perfect Islamic Dawah. I think you sent me a message earlier saying if you are thinking of coming on. If not, I think I'll end the stream in maybe about 5 minutes if nobody's gonna be joining us today. So what should I talk about in the meantime? Let's see. I don't know if everybody's caught the new video, which I uploaded last night. So instead of having the stream last night, I uploaded a new video. I'm trying to continue that series of Qur'anic perspectives, which I started a long time ago and didn't finish. I actually have a lot of video ideas for that, which I need to record and upload for that. There's actually a backlog of a lot of ideas I want to have on, but I haven't been able to. I mean, one of the good things, again, why having these regular streams is good. It just forces me to put something out there from among the backlog of things which I have, which I could present in a video or in anything else. It's out there, though, because they're in the middle of these long streams. I'm not sure how many people will listen to them or find them, but it's okay. So Mazo here has, they're all coming from Adam's progeny. Maybe that's what, maybe, but that would be a bit far-fetched, to be honest, because it is talking about Bani Israel, right? Giving you what we have not given others, right? So if you go back to the verse, it says, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. We call the favor of God upon you. So it's a ni'mah upon them, specifically upon them, right? إِذْ جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ, when He made among you prophets, وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا, and made among you kings. So it is, I think it's talking about Bani Israel. And the last part, I think, makes it equally clear. وَآتَاكُمْ, and He gave you مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِ أَحَدًا مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ, and gave you what He did not give anybody else from the worlds. So I think, saying that it's just because they are part of Bani Adam, and Bani Adam also have kings, and I think that's a stretch. Can you please tell Ayat I missed your intro? Sure, yes, why not? I can do it again. So basically I'm talking about two verses which for me I'm still thinking about, but they provide issues which I find I haven't solved. This is one of them. The verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah says, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ أَنْبِيَاءَ وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا وَآتَاكُمْ مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِ أَحَدًا مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ. Remember when Moses said to his people, "O my people, remember the favor of God upon you when He appointed among you," was in Arabic says جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ أَنْبِيَاءَ, prophets, and جَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا, made you into kings, and gave you that which He had not given anyone among the worlds. So my question is basically between, when you talk about Bani Israel, of course you're talking about the children of Israel. Israel is Yaqub alayhi salam. Yaqub, the son of Ishaq, the son of Ibrahim. Okay, so Bani Israel are the descendants of Yaqub. So between Yaqub and Musa, when were Bani Israel ever kings? When did they have kings among them? Of course, the Quran there's nothing else in the Quran which contradicts that idea that they did have kings. But as far as I know historically, there's no. I mean, we have very little information about Ben Israel anyway. Before Musa, especially, right? Before Musa, I mean, most of what we have, of course, was even up Genesis. All of that is supposed to have been written by Musa, or at least after Musa, right? So even Ibrahim's story, everything that's mentioned in the Bible or in the Tanakh, all of the history pre-Musa, it was all written in Musa's time or afterwards, right? So what do we know about before then? But it seems that the Quran is saying that between Yaqub and Musa, there were kings. They had kings. And I mentioned this could link a little bit into what Mufti Abu Layth was putting forward, the idea that Moses was a Akhenaten, one of the basically one of the kings or pharaohs of one of the Egyptian dynasties. So that could be a link to there. I'm not sure. The other verse which I was talking about was this verse. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ افترى على الله كذبا, and who is more unjust than the one who invents a lie upon God. So that's one thing. Or he says, it has been revealed to me when nothing has been revealed to me. And who says, سأنزل مثل ما أنزل الله. I will cause to come down, or I'll bring down like what God has sent down. Now, the interesting thing, another interesting thing about these two is, okay, here we have the or, so it's either this or this, right? أو قال, sorry, كذا أو قال أوحي إلي, so أو قال أوحي إلي ولم يوحى إليه شيئا. And then this, the next one doesn't say "ow," doesn't say "or." Whoever says, I'll bring down what God has brought down. So, a possible solution to this could be that this and this are the same thing. So these are put together. So these are put together. So the one who says, it has been revealed to me when it hasn't been revealed to me, and who says, so that same person basically, the same person is saying both things. The same person is saying both things, and that's why they are included among the Azlam. It could be that way. I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about it, but I'm putting this forward just because maybe somebody else would have some better suggestions to that. So my issue or question with regard to this verse is, phrase it. And so the question issue is, why is the one who says he or she will reveal like what Allah has revealed? Why is that put together with the most unjust, when to bring like what Allah has brought is actually a challenge in the Quran? So why should that be considered among the most unjust? So that's basically my thing. So we have a suggestion from Muhammad Hassan. I think Bani Israel has something to do with Hyksos, who ruled Egypt for a while. I have no idea who that is, but that's interesting. If you can put that up somewhere, like a detailed idea of that, maybe a post somewhere, Reddit or a Twitter thread where you could explain something about that, will be helpful. Or maybe come on yourself next time and explain that, because I have no idea about any of that. Aladdin, I know he has a lot of interesting ideas. Yaqub is not Israel. There's in Surah Maryam where Yaqub and Israel are mentioned separately. Where is that? Which surah is that? So in Surah Maryam, you're saying. When does it say that in Surah Maryam? Can you find the verse for us? Because it would fly in the face of everything, right? If Yaqub is not Israel. But I think the question would still remain anyway, right? I mean, when were Bani Israel kings before Musa? So it's in Surah Maryam. Let me see if I can find the verse. Are you saying in the same verse they are mentioned separately? Okay. So it looks like Israel is only mentioned in one verse in Surah Maryam, which is أولئك الذين أنعم الله عليهم من النبيين من ذرية آدم ومن حملنا مع نوح ومن ذرية إبراهيم وإسرائيل وممن هدينا واجتبينا. It says here, and from the descendants of Ibrahim and Israel, ومن هدينا واجتبينا. I don't, in that verse they're not mentioned separately in Surah Maryam. So maybe you could clarify which verse you're talking about. But let's see your next comment here. So it says here, muluk, you're saying can just mean people who have mulk, power in society. And I understood that Israel is priesthood of Egypt. Yeah, okay, the priesthood of Egypt. When before before Musa, they were priests. I don't see where, because again they were. I'm thinking that the more likely explanation would be that Musa was around until Bani Israel actually had kings. That could be the thing, but because before then they weren't. Because muluk, yes, you're right. Muluk could just mean those who possess things, but I don't think it's gonna. I mean, to say that muluk by muluk is meant the priests is, to be honest, it's a stretch. These are two very separate ideas, right? Kings and priests. Could have said جعل فيكم, I don't know, رهبانا or something, or أحبارا, instead of muluk. Mulk and priestliness are not similar, especially if you talk about Egypt, where they really did have kings and pharaohs. So that's that. I'm not sure about that. Neither to Israel status. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, to be honest. Yeah, we have, I don't know how to pronounce your name, my friend. Bilgan, I don't know. I think the Ben Israel were blessed and the prophets came from them because Ibrahim asked God to make his progeny people who would keep the commandments. Yes, that's true. But my question about this is basically that in that verse, Musa is reminding his people, right? He's saying, recall. Let me bring it back up. Recall if God made among you prophets and made you kings. So Israel, when were they muluk before Musa? When were they muluk before Musa? Okay, or in Musa's time. That's basically my question about that. So not sure about that. They also say, let's see the next comment. We see this also in the Torah where he is making his pledge to God. Yeah, I agree with that. Read 1958 before that. In 1958, I think that's the verse that I was mentioning before. Yeah, but that verse 1958, it's saying it starts with ulaika. It's saying those were, right? Those were, and of course, before that, of course, in Surah Maryam, you've got Ibrahim is mentioned, for example. Okay, that doesn't mean that the Ibrahim in verse 58 and the Ibrahim that's mentioned before are different Ibrahims. So it says before then, it's saying, واذكر في الكتاب مريم واذكر في الكتاب إبراهيم. The verse before that exactly says واذكر في الكتاب Idris, talking about Idris. Where does it say Yaqub? So what verse specifically in Surah Maryam is saying the name of Yaqub before verse 58? Let me see. Do we need to find a proof in history? History is not something that you can always write. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mentioned exactly at the beginning, that we are not looking. This isn't one of those sort of like, I mentioned in the beginning when we talk about that verse where God says you will not find basically many contradictions within the Quran. Okay, we're talking about within the Quran itself. We're not talking about the history that we have or the science that we have. For most of human history, the majority of the history and the science is wrong. Okay, so the Quran is not, God is not saying that you should compare the Quran with what you know of history or what you know of science or anything like that in order to ascertain if it has contradictions or not. It's not about contradictions with your modern science or with your modern history. It's not about that, whether modern or ancient. It's about internal. So you're absolutely right. But this is just questions that I have, right? So this could be one other thing I'm saying is this could be that something which could lead that, maybe in 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, it is actually discovered that Bani Israel were kings, okay, that they did have kings among them. Or somebody finds out, that there's some document somewhere which mentions, so and so of the Bani Israel who were kings. Right now, I don't think it's accepted anywhere that there were kings among Bani Israel during Musa's time or before Musa's time. Um, and if it's shown, it will be something again what some of course would consider to be a historical miracle of the Quran. And there are things like that. I mean, the Quran gives very accurate information about ancient Egypt, which is very different from the Bible, right? So the famous one is that in Musa's time, the kings of Egypt were called pharaohs, but before that, in Yusuf's time, they weren't called that; they were called kings, and the Quran has that. Whereas, for example, the Bible doesn't. The Bible calls the ruler in Yusuf's time, and in Moses' time, calls them both pharaohs, which is sort of an inaccuracy in terms of our current knowledge of history. So you're right. We're not gonna rely on history, but this is just something. It's always something to have to be thinking about. That doesn't mean we can see our system is so slow. I'm trying to put on this other comment. Yes, Ashur Said. Do you know that some people believe Bani Israel weren't in Egypt, but further down towards Sudan and migrated to Yemen rather than Palestine? What do you think about this? I've heard of this, but I haven't looked into it, to be honest. There's this, I forget his name, but somebody who wrote a book that said the title of it is, and you find this guy on YouTube as well with little clips. He says Egypt knew no pharaohs or Israelites. So he says that in Egypt there were no pharaohs, there were no Israelites at all. So that's what he says. But yes, I've heard this that Bani Israel. I've heard also that Bani Israel actually were always just in Arabia rather than in. So that's what he says as well. He says that these were in Arabia. Bani Israel were in Arabia. We have somebody backstage. I'm going to bring them on. Rashid Abdul Rahman, maybe. I can't see the full name. Assalamu alaikum. I'm bringing you on now, okay?
Wa alaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. How are you? Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I was watching I was listening to the show, and it's a very interesting subject. I also had a bit of trouble before. I mean, understanding what that exactly meant. I've contemplated on the same ayahs, actually, two of them, the ones that you have mentioned. So it's very interesting that that you also arrived at the same. Let's say maybe not confusion, but it's I don't know exactly how to call it, but uncertainty. Let's say,
Yeah, notice the same thing that you can't fit it into what the narrative that we have at least.
Right? Yeah,
The
exactly.
we have, I can't sort it out in that. But yeah, I mean, look, for example, these were things which. Because a lot of times now, there's a lot of polemics against Islam, and people bring out, this verse and this verse, and this contradicts this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And most of the time, those verses that people bring out, they're not, to me, they're not an issue at all. And I've been hoping somebody would mention this verse, for example, and then maybe some other scholar somewhere or somebody would be able to provide the answer for it. But exactly. I mean, this, for example, it's not even noticed by the anti-Islamists and the the people who are against Islam or try to prove the Quran to be wrong, etc., like that. None of you mention these things, which is why it's always contemplating the Quran by yourself and thinking about it by yourself. You see things which others don't, and usually, like yourself, for example, you'll find that there would be people elsewhere who had thought the same thing, but we never get to meet. But look here, right? We're meeting. The beauties of the internet, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought. I mean, one thing that really puzzled me about the verse was also because this is a verse that not exactly, maybe you could say, is in conflict with the Quranic, understanding of the story of Moses. Like from what you understand, of course, it seems as if there were no kings, but it also would contradict or is in conflict with history as we know it, both biblically and archaeological history. So it's kind of one of those verses that basically is in conflict with with the whole thing, just outside the Quran and also inside the Quran.
Yeah.
So the thing that
Yeah.
I understood from it,
But I mean, from within the Quran, I'm not sure if it's in conflict with anything within the Quran, right?
yeah,
So I mean, it says that we made among you kings, right? So Musa is
exactly,
saying we made among you kings, right?
yeah,
But I mean, that's I don't think that's can be accepted if we knew nothing about Bani Israel,
yeah,
except what's in the Quran.
mm,
That's not contradicting against anything else within the Quran,
yeah,
because
and
it's not
not
like
not
Bani
exactly
Israel.
contradiction, not exactly
Yeah.
contradiction, but more like, for example, you have like a let's say a perception of the story of Moses. You have like a perception
Yeah.
of the story of Moses,
Yeah.
that you go into the Quran with, that you know, like for example, a certain pattern the story follows,
Yeah.
and you would, for example, when you enter it with that perception of the narrative, then it breaks down a little bit when you look at this verse. For example, when you look at the outer picture and you take this verse and okay, it sort of breaks the perception. Maybe it doesn't contradict the Quran
I mean,
within the Quran itself.
yeah.
Yeah,
Let me
it
tell you
doesn't.
the closest I get to sort of like reconciling this. It is
Mm,
because the thing about it, we sort of just unconsciously accept the idea that Musa alayhi salam
mm.
died before entering the promised land, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly. Yeah.
the Quran mentions, right? So
Mm,
Musa saves Bani Israel, saved Bani Israel from Pharaoh's area and fight for the land, right?
mm,
And then they say, we're not going to fight him. You and your Lord go and fight,
mm,
right? So they Bani Israel tell Musa that you and your Lord go and fight. So
mm.
then God says to Musa, فإنها محرما عليهم 40 سنة يتيهون في الأرض, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm,
it's been things. So that's basically where the Quran story of Musa seems to
mm.
stop, right?
Yeah.
Seems to
Yeah.
stop in terms of where we think what happened, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But I mean, one way to resolve this verse with that story is that no, they wandered for the 40 years and then they went in and
Mm.
actually fought
Yeah.
for the land, and then they became owners of that land. So then they all became muluk. So it's not
Yeah.
even that they were just kings, but ja'alakum muluka. He made you into all of you
Yeah.
basically were kings. So that's one way to resolve it.
Yeah.
Um, but generally, like you said, I mean the idea. I mean, there's not much archaeology, is there, for
Mm.
Ben Israel? I mean,
Not
in
much.
terms of I mean the history, archaeological history. Did the Israelites have a actual kingdom which was supposed to be
Mm.
very big? There's not much, as far as I know, there's not much archaeology and history which is secular history, which is
Mm.
supporting this very strongly. Which is why, like I said, some people are saying, like Mufti Abu Layth was saying, that it could be in Egypt, right? This whole story
Mm.
could be, the pharaohs, Akhenaten, Musa was Akhenaten, or whatever his name was, right? And Suleiman was this other pharaoh. Him and I don't know.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
anybody remember these names?
Yeah.
But yeah, but
What
I
did he say?
understand
It
what you
was
mean.
Pharaoh Manepta? Wasn't it Manepta that he said it was? I think he said it was Pharaoh Manepta, or
I
from the
forget.
Manepta stele.
Yeah,
It's also the one which seems to mention the house of David, but that's a very very late, like, because a very late period, because with the Manepta you have the Manepta stele, the one that mentions the house of David, but that's then you would have to be speaking like very very late after
yeah,
even David, if it is Pharaoh Manepta.
yeah. Well, I don't know, to be honest about that. I mean, I didn't really memorize these kind of things to try to fit them into.
Mm,
I just thought it was interesting So,
Yeah, for me,
maybe this can be.
my understanding
Yeah.
of the verse, before we go on to the next one, my understanding of the verse, I understood it like, okay, it would have to shift the history a little bit, in terms of, archaeology and all that, that maybe the biblical understanding from where we have the perception that maybe it is not entirely historical, like it's not perfect in its history. Like, for example, you have Moses going into the Holy Land, as it's known at the time. Uh, and during that time, there were different rulers, there were different kings surrounding, in Israel at that time and Palestine. And, such as the land of Ai or Jericho, and basically all the different countries and lands, they had different kings. And I think that Moses made what seems more logical to me or more historic is that Moses maybe made a treaty with these kings, and those kings also had power, over the children of Israel at the time. And so when Moses says that وَجَعْلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا, that this is a general statement. It's like he's speaking like it's like a general statement that includes all other people around. So he's mentioning that God made you kings, like the you here, not maybe
I
specific
see what
as in
you
to
mean.
the children of Israel, but just speaking generally, made وَجَعْلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا, like all the people who are surrounding us, because at that time maybe they had intermingled with the surrounding
Yeah.
countries.
Like he made you the equals,
Yeah,
sort of like in
exactly.
a
Like,
sense,
for example, just mentioned,
right?
because they had intermingled with the surrounding, the different lands around and the different peoples, and that it was a normal thing. So you would speak, I would say that you would speak like that, وَجَعْلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا, because now you have possession, you have land, there are kings among you that we have a treaty with. So I think he's speaking more generally than specifically Bani Israel.
Yeah. I mean, that would make sense, especially when it comes to how the verse is worded, right? It says,
Yeah,
whereas the other one says, جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ, he made among you
exactly.
kings. So not all of you are kings, some of
Yeah.
you are kings. Whereas that part says, وَجَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا, he made you muluk, meaning like
Mm,
all of you, all of Ben Israel, you were all muluk.
yeah.
So that would make sense. I mean, I've been suspecting that that's the key, because that's the key difference, right? Here it
Yeah,
says,
exactly.
جَعَلَ فِيكُمْ
Mm,
أنبياء, and this one says, جَعَلَكُمْ مُلُوكًا. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense to me. I'll have to think about it more deeply,
Mm.
but it definitely makes a lot of
Because
sense. Brilliant,
exactly,
thank you.
because if they had intermingled with other people, then they would, then more at maybe some of them did in fact go onto Moses' side. We never know. So they became Muslims, let's say, and because of the intermingling, he's speaking to like all the people who are there, present with him, and just speaking generally, not specific like by blood, the people who are Hebrews, but just everybody. Yeah, I think that's how I understood it.
All right, nice.
Mm,
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Let me bring in what's his name Aladdin. He mentioned, because we were asking him before about the verse in Surah Maryam, before which were
mm,
mentioned, where Yaqub is mentioned their name. And yes, he mentioned it here. It's the verse which says,
mm,
وَذَرِّيَّتَهُ إِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ. And when he, talking about Ibrahim alayhi salam, when
mm,
he separated himself from them, his people, we
mm,
gifted him with Ishaq and Yaqub, and each we made into a prophet.
mm,
وَهَبْنَا لَهُم مِّن رَحْمَتِنَا وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُم لِسَانَ صِدْقٍ عَلِيًّا. Right,
mm.
and it continues, and then we
Ulaika.
call in the book from Musa,
Mm,
etc. Yeah?
mm,
But again, I'm not sure, because here it says that the verse in 80. I don't see how that's not a. I don't see it as being a very strong indication that Yaqub and Israel are two different people. Um, it's
is it
interesting. I
talking
mean, maybe,
about, is it talking about the one that says ulaika alladhina an'ama Allahu alayhim
yeah,
minan
yeah,
nabiyyin?
exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, من ذرية آدم وممن
Yeah,
حملنا
women
مع نوح
hamalna
ومن ذرية
ma'nuh. Yeah.
إبراهيم وإسرائيل. So he's saying
Okay.
Israel,
Mm-hmm.
Israel and Yaqub are different people, which is interesting.
Okay.
Interesting idea.
I have actually
I should
heard
look into
something
it,
of that.
because
I
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
because in terms of for this verse, because we were talking about before, even if we say, okay, so let's say for argument's sake
Mm,
that Israel and Yaqub are different people. So then who is Israel? And still the question becomes, if we accept, if we say that this means kings, still the question becomes between that Israel, whoever he is, okay, if he's not from the descent,
mm,
this Israel, is he from, or he's not? Because he has to be from Ibrahim, right? Because Musa is from Ibrahim. So I'm guessing,
yeah.
Ben Israel ultimately come from Ibrahim alayhi salam, right?
Mm,
So this
mm.
Israel, even if it's not Yaqub, it must be
Someone
after
from the
Yaqub.
progeny. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it must be after Yaqub himself, right?
Mm,
If you have Ibrahim alayhi salam, then
mm,
Ishaq, then Yaqub, okay?
mm.
And if the
Yeah.
Yaqub is not Israel, then Israel must be later. Maybe Israel is Yaqub's son. I don't
Mm,
know. But the question still remains between that Israel and Musa, who were kings. If we say that this verse is saying that there were kings, but again, I'm
Workings.
leaning more to the idea that it's not saying there were among you kings like you
Mm,
yourself have said. Let me just
yeah.
bring in because I know you want to talk about the other verse. Let me just because there's a lot
Yes.
of
Sure.
comments here I want to
Yeah.
include. So I'm just saying, and there are prophets that God not mentioned in the Quran. God says so, yes, definitely. And Al-Din, what do you have here again? We understand today that Jews are same as Ben Israel just because Jews say so. There's no indication for such a meaning in the Quran. All right, but I mean, still the question. I mean, okay, they're not the same, but still the question. If we just stick with Beni Israel, so Beni Israel, who are part of Musa's people, we're still
Mm,
asking during Musa's time and before, were there kings between Musa, including Musa's time, were there kings?
mm.
From
Yeah.
Israel, I don't think that helps to solve it. And separating Ben Israel from being Jews, I don't think that solves what this verse
No,
is
no, I don't
saying.
think it does either.
In 520, wasn't said that Moses said to Ben Israel, but to his people. Okay, I see what you mean. Um, so then who are his people then? Because of course Musa's people have to be in Israel, Ben Israel. I mean, who are his people? He brought out the Ben Israel from. That's
Mm,
that's 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 pretty much like he brought out the Ben Israel
mm,
from Egypt, and
mm.
so I mean, who are Moses' people if they're not
But I
Ben
do,
Israel?
I think that maybe he might have a point in that when he says his people, it goes back to that which we were talking about. That if the people had intermingled with other nations around, that then it is not
Mm.
just Bani Israel that are his people. That was just
Okay.
speaking my people, basically everybody. So it's not just Ya Bani Israel, but Ya Qawmi, and that is including basically every single people that is around at the time. Those
But
people
does
who were on his side, of course. I mean,
okay.
mm,
All right. Yeah, I mean, he says it here, right? But his people, and he lived among all Egyptians. So they were his people, and he
mm,
was their prince. Ben Israel are just part of those people.
yeah.
Okay.
So if he
Um,
was in Egypt, for example, if Musa, for example, when he
so
was in Egypt,
this statement is being said in Egypt, basically. That's what Aladdin. That's why he's saying this statement is being said in Egypt.
mm,
So he's talking to all Egyptians and Ben Israel who are among them. Okay,
yeah, that's
that
also
can make
possible. Yes,
that can make sense as well.
it's also
Nice.
possible. Mm,
I understand what you're saying now, Aladdin. I think anyway.
yeah. Mm. But I
Um,
mean, the only issue is that if you actually read it in context,
all
because when you look at
right.
the story in context, it's a bit maybe it wouldn't fit perfectly if you look in the context of the verse. If you might be a bit thrown off if you assume that that is in Egypt. If you look at the whole verses, for example, the series of verses within that
Yeah,
context,
before then,
yeah,
yeah, it doesn't
yeah,
it doesn't seem to say doesn't
yeah,
seem to
it
indicate that it's
doesn't
in
seem to
Egypt.
indicate Egypt.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, I mean, it could also still indicate Egypt. You know why?
mm,
Because if Musa is going to recall the favor of God to Ben Israel, that one of the most important favors would be that He saved them from Fir'aun.
Yeah.
Right. So if he was speaking here after Egypt,
Okay. Yeah.
one of the things you could say,
Mm.
with قال موسى لقومه يا قوم اذكروا نعمة الله إذ أنجاكم من آل فرعون. That would be one of the most important ni'mas to be recounted. So that could mean that this is in Egypt. Very interesting thoughts. Very interesting
Okay.
thoughts.
I can see that actually being the case if if ja'ala, for example, if we skip the other part where it says if and if ja'alakum muluka, for example, that is just reminding them that remember you used to be, or that you remember that He made you, not that you are now, but He made you, for example, before that you used to be kings, or used to be not kings entirely, but muluka, possessing, or people possessing land, possessing things, and all that. It's possible.
Yes. Let's go on to the next verse. Did you have something to add about the other verse? Um,
No,
so the other verse
no.
that I was talking
I think
about.
that no, I think that I think there are multiple theories about it, but that's all I understand about it, I think.
Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. Thanks, brilliant. Thank you for that input. Yeah, I mean, I think that is key. The key thing, which is why I put it over here in the, here I put it in there. It says here, جعل فيكم أنبياء, and this one says جعلكم ملوكا.
Yeah.
I think that gives the key idea, right? Because جعلكم ملوكا is like we made you all into possessors or kings or something like that. So that could help out. But yeah, very interesting thing. So what about, I mean, the other verse which I was talking about?
This one, yeah, I looked at it and before when I was reading, and the weird thing about here is that for me, the way I understood it, besides the fact that it says "Unzilu mithlama," that also struck me when I looked at it. I said "Unzilu mithlama," like a human being cannot actually cause something to be sent down, particularly like how would that even happen? So the thing is that the way I understood is the wow that comes there, that maybe it's not a reference, it doesn't mean end particularly, that
this
it's
one,
more of yes, that it's more of a descriptive wow. So if you understand it, for example, it says أو قال أوحي إلي ولم يوحى إليه شيء. So that is the main part. Like, for example, it says that that it has been inspired to me, whereas it has not been inspired to where nothing has been inspired to that individual. Then the wow here is more descriptive, saying, like, for example, meaning the one who says says that I will send down. So basically building up on what came before it. So he's saying that it's more of describing what was before and not an end.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I got a little bit of that as well when I was thinking about it, because here, of course, the first part is this, right? وَنَظَمُ مُقَالَ. It's not let me do that. Hold on. This part, right? This part is the first part, and then the ow here.
Yeah.
You have ow, and then it says this, and so these two must be these two are
Connected.
one unit together.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're connected one unit together. Either, like, I was thinking more that this is a this, and this is the same the person who does this and this both. But you're saying now that this could be more like a description.
Yeah.
The second part here, more of a description or a continuation of that.
Yes.
Right.
And exactly. Because for me, because I think that when you examine language, specifically the Semitic languages, Arabic, and also it has a similarity to Hebrew. And when you look at Hebrew, it uses also the end, the wow, it also happens in the Quran sometimes where, for example, the wow is actually used, but it does not mean end. It just describing what, more building upon.
Yeah,
So,
it could
for
be like
example, when
yet.
Allah says that man kana aduwwa lillahi wa malaikatihi, wa rusulihi wa jibril wa mikal, it's putting emphasis on something,
Yeah.
like that. So here specifically, I would say it is making, because the verse would have just been, for example, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنِ افْتَرَى عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا أَوْ قَالَ أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ وَلَمْ يُوحَ إِلَيْهِ شَيْءٌ. For example, or it would have just said أو قال أو قال سأنزل مثل ما أنزل, or he
Yeah,
says,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah. So
but the
they
wow
are
here is
connected.
descriptive.
Yeah, so they are connected. Yeah, I know you mean the different wows, and like the famous one, of course, is ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع
Mm.
البصير.
Yeah.
That there is nothing like him, and he is that, and really is more like yet.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's nothing
exactly.
like him, yet still he is the seeing, the hearing.
Exactly, yes. So that's how
Okay.
I think that it's more describing. The person says "أوحي إلي ولم يوحى إليه شيء," because when someone says that it has been revealed to me, whereas nothing has been revealed to him, he's basically saying exactly what the next line is. He's saying that he's gonna reveal something similar to the Quran. And this word here, سأنزل مثل ما أنزل الله, basically it just means I'm going to, to say something that Allah said, or I'm going to claim Allah is telling me something that, or something like that. I'm going to claim revelation. I'm going to claim inspiration from God, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I understood it. The verse, that one.
Right. That makes that's very helpful. I definitely have to think a lot of what you said, what Nadine said as well about both verses. What both of you said about those verses. Definitely, definitely giving me help on that, which is excellent. Let me just have a look at what are your thoughts on these verses. One is asking me that. I'm not sure.
Which one is
Which
that
verses
one?
are these?
What?
Let me see. So the verses of Surah Hud. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان من كان يريد الحياة الدنيا وزينتها نوفي إليهم أعمالهم فيها وهم فيها لا يبخسون أولئك الذين ليس لهم في الآخرة إلا النار وحبط ما صنعوا فيها وباطل ما كانوا يعملون. So these verses, these verses, I mean, they seem pretty clear to me. It's for those who decide willingly that they want everything in this world and they want nothing from the akhirah. So God will give them everything that they want in this world, give them the reward of the word, of their deeds here, and in the akhirah they will have nothing. I mean, I'd have to think more about that, but that's how it strikes me originally. Is there actual problem, specific idea, question about those verses you have?
I don't think that the verse, because it's just saying that, that
All right, he's saying so.
talking about this word.
Yeah, he's saying that it seemed to signify that desiring the present world leads to hell and not being sinful, just desiring this world. Now, I think it's somebody who like is asking God, not is God asking God that they don't want the next life. It's not so much that they just want this world. They want this life. They want everything in this world, without without any reward in the next life.
Yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
what it means. من كان يريد الحياة الدنيا وزينتها. Whoever wants الحياة
Yeah,
الدنيا
نوفي إليهم.
and its adornments. It's not that you're desirous of thing.
Yeah.
So if you are asking for your good deeds to be نوفي إليهم أعمالهم فيها. If you're asking for the reward of your good deeds in this life, that means what are you going to have for in the akhirah? You're just going to have your bad deeds. You're not going to have the scales, right? The scales on your Qiyamah. You have, your good deeds weighed against your bad deeds. So if you decided, God, give me all the reward of my good deeds now in this world, okay, then in the Akhirah, you're not going to have anything to balance the bad deeds. Okay. أولئك الذين ليس لهم في الآخرة النار. They won't have anything except النار, because they won't have any good deeds except their bad deeds.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, that's how I think I would also understand it, that they're not particularly doing good. I mean, because it's telling you that man kana yuridu al-hayata dunya wa zinaha nuwaffi ilayhim. So Allah is going to pay them in full, nuwaffi ilayhim a'malahum fiha. But then, as far as the next life is concerned, so the warrant is not because they were doing good things, but it's because that's why Allah, for example, says وَحَبِطَ مَا صَنَعُوا فِيهَا, that everything basically that they did, it just useless. It's just meaningless. They weren't doing a productive, work. They weren't doing deeds that are productive in the sight of Allah.
Yeah.
Because that even, I mean, it says وَبَاطِلٌ
And I
مَا
did
كَانُوا.
also mention here that that verse in Surah 58, ما كانوا يعملون, says in Surah Maryam, verse 58, that it says offspring of Ibrahim, the offspring of Israel. Yeah, again, that's true, but isn't that mentioned that way just because the offspring of Ibrahim doesn't necessarily have to be, because the offspring of Ibrahim is not just Ishaq and then Yaqub. There's also Ismail. And also just because Yaqub had many sons, so he's mentioned again, right?
Yeah.
Just like, even when it says وَمِمَنْ حَمَلْنَا مَعَ نُوحٍ, and from the descendants of Nuh, as far as we can tell, إِنَّ مِنْ شِيعَتِهِ لإبراهيم, right?
Yeah,
About Nuh
exactly.
alayhi salam, وَإِنَّ مِنْ شِيعَتِهِ لإبراهيم, from his tribe, or his Shia, his people, Ibrahim. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'd like to get that more fleshed out from you, Aladdin. The difference, like you're saying, between the Jews
Yeah,
of
I
Bani
also,
Israel and
I'm also a
Israel
bit
and
lost on
Yaqub.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also a bit lost. Is he implying that because both Dhurriya is mentioned on both Ibrahim and Israel, that maybe implies that Israel
They are different.
is not? I mean, obviously, is not the same as Ibrahim, but is he
He's not from the
saying that?
descendants of Ibrahim, I think. That's what he
Yeah,
means. Is that
but
what you mean?
the weird thing though is that. You see, the Quran, when it speaks about Ibrahim, in most cases, usually, it mentions Ibrahim or Ishaq or Yaqub. So it binds those three individuals, and more frequently than it does connect Ismail to Ibrahim. For example, you don't see that connection so much as you see between Ibrahim, Ishaq, or Yaqub. Ibrahim, Ishaq, or Yaqub. You see that very frequently within the Quran.
Yeah.
But in this one, I mean, why mention Ibrahim or Israel? If for example the two of them, why is Yaqub would not be mentioned? I think that it's going off the understanding that people had at the time, which is that maybe that Yaqub was Israel, and it just switches out the name
Which
in
is the
this. But,
names.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, I could get that as well. Sorry if I'm missing. There seems to be a lot of comments, and I might not be able to catch them all. Here we have Marohal is asking me, have you watched Marvelous Qur'an's channel? That's Dr. Hani, right?
Yeah, I've checked him out too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff, not that much. I can't follow along, to be honest, very 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 easily. I don't follow what he's saying a lot of time. He talks a lot about the Ibrahim what's it called? The
Yeah, I
locust.
think.
What's it called?
Yeah,
What did he say?
it
What's
talks
that word
about
he said?
something called circumlocution or the
Locution. That was it. Yeah,
locution, something like that, right?
The Abrahamic locution and stuff.
Yeah,
And I don't get it, to be honest.
I don't
I
get it
don't
too.
understand it. I don't understand it. But I've seen a few. There are also, I think, a couple of movies which I liked of his. But
I remember
I actually
actually, Doctor.
invited him. I went on
Did you see?
when I first came across his channel.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I said, yeah. Did you
Yeah,
see
go ahead.
his episode on where he's on Dhul Qarnayn, in which he said that actually Dhul Qarnayn is the prophet? that the Prophet Muhammad.
No,
I
haven't
was
seen
shocked actually to hear. That was the first time I ever heard that
No, there's a lot of
is
firsts.
actually
There's a lot of firsts I've seen from him, but
yeah,
it's fine. I mean, anybody who is doing a lot of, anybody who is just spending time just contemplating the Quran, I'm happy. I'm happy to
yeah.
see that, but I don't get a lot of what he's saying. But I did actually when I first came across his channel, because I think the first video I saw of his was something which I really liked. I think it was posted on Reddit or somewhere. So I thought, yes, this makes sense. And I didn't get hear about all of his stuff about the Abrahamic locution and stuff like that, and other things which he said, which I can't follow along. But when on that first video, I put a comment for him. I said, look, would you mind? I've started this Caravan of Contemplation live stream where I just want people to come along and share any insights they have in the Quran. So would you be willing to just come along and share some insight? This was especially at the beginning, the first few ones, because there weren't many people coming on to really share anything. It was mostly getting a lot of questions. So I asked him, why didn't you come on and share some of these insights on my stream? At first, he thought that I wanted him to come on and for me to interview him, and then I replied, no, I'm not. I'm not. It's not for me to be interviewing you. I just want, would you like to just come on and just, um, share whatever you want, any insights you have in the Quran, come along and share. I don't think he got back to me though. But he's doing he's got his thing
Yeah.
where he's working a
I
lot.
mean, he has
But I
very
think he's attracted. I saw somewhere that he's attracted the attention of some of the some of the very Salafi polemics which are on YouTube. I'm not going to mention
really
any names,
the
but yeah, he's
Salafis.
attracted. Like there's somebody who does a lot of refutation stuff and responses
Yeah.
that it seems like he's getting ready to go after marvelous Quran and his
No,
ideas.
I remember actually Farid. I think
Yeah.
Farid Responds made a video on him. If it's not, or maybe was it Dawaman? No way, yeah, Dawaman. The Dawaman I think made a video about marvelous Quran. If someone can correct me
Yeah.
on that, I think he made a refutation.
Well,
And
yeah,
yeah, him.
basically that's the sort of like the crew that I'm mentioning. It seems to have he seems to have popped up on their radar. So,
Yeah.
but he doesn't. I don't think he minds. I don't think he's going to be
No.
interacting with them or anything much. So it's not an
But
issue.
but I found his views to be quite interesting. I mean, the way he goes into detail, or he goes into details like, yeah, you can't get easily lost from what he's saying. But it was quite fascinating, especially that thing when he said about Dhul Qarnayn. I had never even that was a fascinating thing to hear. Because I never thought that could be possible. Completely out of the realm of possibilities. For
Out of
Dhul
the
Qarnayn
blue.
to be the prophet, that I never
Yeah.
thought of that.
Yeah. No, I realized something though when trying to watch his stuff. I realized that I need to make because I'm thinking to myself, okay, this must be how people feel. Because a lot of my videos, ones which I make, are very long. So when I'm sitting there on, I want to make some time to actually try to understand his material.
Yeah.
And his videos are very long, and I'm like, I can't. I don't have time. Streams. They're looking at Caravan of Contemplation streams, and now, for example, now it's 1 hour and 15 minutes. Who's going to sit and listen to it? Or some of my other longer videos, those video essays, which I make, which are quite long. Who's going to sit and listen to them? So I think I understood from that I need to make my videos shorter. Yeah, just to make it more bite-sized. But then again, there are other people who make very long videos, and people sit and watch the whole thing. I mean, they're up to the hundreds of
Up to the
thousands
end.
of views.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of comments. I'm just going to go right to the bottom. Sorry,
Yeah. Sure. No
and
problem.
see. Let me just see what we have in the comments. Yeah, some talk about Dr. Hani has appeared in the chat. Let me just see if there's anything about what we were saying. Assalamu alaikum, Adriana. Good to see you again.
Walaikum salam.
Yeah, I think Monkey Man. I'll have to ponder these verses more. Thank you so much. Yeah, welcome. Um, I don't know if you're thanking me, to be honest. Maybe somebody else. All right, I think that's okay. All right, I don't think there's anything else
Okay.
to get through in the comments.
Mm.
Rashid, yes, your name is.
Yes, 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 yes. Rashid,
Yes,
actually,
I think
Rashid.
this is
Yeah.
the first.
Yeah.
Rashid. This is the first time you've come on, or
No,
did you come on a long time?
I've been actually on. I think this is my third or fourth time. I think.
Third or fourth time, yeah?
Yeah,
Because
I
you haven't
think.
been on for a long time. I think maybe that's
Yeah,
why. I
exactly. Yeah.
remember because I was like, no, I remember your name and your voice a bit, but I wasn't too sure because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you came on a few times earlier. Which streams? Do you remember which ones they were?
Um, I remember. I mean, I remember when we talked about. I remember asking questions. I mean, I don't remember exactly which streams, but I remember
Mm.
asking you once about the verse in Surah An-Nisa, the one what was regarding fiqh, the one with
Mm.
the kalala. I remember I
Yeah.
asked you about that, and you said you
Yes,
would
yes,
get back on that, but you
yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
I think you forgot it.
Yeah, I must have forgotten
I-
about that.
yeah,
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 the fiqh about Kalal and
yeah.
yes,
About
the
kalala, the two verses.
Maliki.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, there's two verses which are similar. Where I think in the Malik Madhab, one is talking about the Kalala from the paternal, and the other one is the maternal,
Mm,
something like that. I mean, it's one of those fiqh ones which I don't really look into as much, to be honest.
mm,
But maybe
mm,
I'll try to remember to actually look into that again.
mm.
But I think that's what it was about. Yes, I remember now.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm
And
good.
the other one was, I think I also came on once when we were talking the verse about Adam, for example, when Allah talks about the creation covenant, the mithaq that happened before. Uh, when
Mm,
Allah says, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ
yeah.
رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ, it basically, على أنفسهم ألست
Yeah,
بربكم, that verse. I remember I called in once
yeah,
when we were talking about that one as well.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I remember that. Yes,
Yeah.
I was saying about that, and I still think that same thing. That this is more like almost like permission to be allowed to come into the world.
Mm. Yeah, I
Alastu bi
think.
rabbikum, am I not your Lord? So, um, it's like to be allowed to come into the world in the first place.
Mm.
You have to say yes. You know that the only thing allowed in existence is what what enters into the space of where he is Zarab and
Mm.
that kind of thing.
Do you think that
But yeah,
has any connection to the verse in Surah Al-Ahzab, which seems to talk about a certain kind of covenant that human
yeah,
beings took upon themselves, but the other creation did not? Do you think it has
yeah,
anything to
yeah.
do with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we mentioned it last time, but yes, I mean, I think I wrote about these two things somewhere
Yeah.
where I put these two verses together,
Mm.
but I forget where, and I forget where I wrote about it. But yeah, that's how I see those as being um, the acceptance of, as they typically say, right, the acceptance of the ability to have free will. That
Ah,
you are
okay.
given a choice, you are given sort of like a free will before free will,
Mm.
like an ability through some mystery we don't understand. You're given an ability to choose whether you want free will or not, you know,
Mm.
whether you
Yeah.
want to have the amana or not. Because look, the human beings are
Mm.
able to have a choice even without having that, but
Mm.
the human beings
Mm.
took it upon themselves. So I see that in that way,
Mm.
and I see that the other verse about وَأَشْهَدُهُمْ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ,
Mm.
that it's before even coming into before it's like God looking into the realm of things which have yet to be created,
Mm.
okay, human beings who have yet to be even be created, and
Mm.
asking them, asking them, do you accept to be created? Do you
Yeah.
accept for me to be your Lord and for me to create you? And
Mm.
those who say yes, we testify you are our Lord and we accept for you to create us, they get created. So that's
Okay.
how I answer, this idea about, the people who
That
say, why was I didn't ask to be created. Well, I think maybe you did. You accepted to be created.
So that would be that's a very striking imagery. I mean, when you think about that human being, that free will predates like our creation.
Yeah, yeah.
That is
A free will, a pre-free will, free will.
exactly.
The free will, which is different.
Yeah.
There's a very nice phrase actually, which I saw recently from Sayyid Hussein Nasr in one of in a video. He's saying, he was talking about actually heaven and the idea of heaven and the highest levels of heaven in a very Sufic kind of way, where he's saying by some mystery we don't understand. He said um, we are able to recognize our nothingness within divinity. I like that.
Okay. That's a
That's a very nice phrase.
yeah. Oh,
To be able to
that's
recognize
actually
our
that's actually very good.
yeah
I mean, that's very well
yeah
phrased. Yeah.
yeah by some mystery. I think that's how he's phrased it exactly. By some mystery
Mm.
we don't understand, we're
Mm.
able to recognize our nothingness within divinity. I
Yeah.
thought,
Okay.
that makes sense. Anyway,
That makes sense. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Mm.
All right. Okay. I think we'll end that again. I was asking that because I just wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing
Yes. Yes. Mhm.
your
No, what can I
insight
say?
into
One
that.
thing.
They are very
One
helpful.
last
I'm
thing,
sure
though.
other people will find it helpful.
Mm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just
Yes.
now.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to say it very fast. I was just thinking about
Hmm.
the verse that verse about yeah, the one with the first verse, with Ban Israel and all that. Something, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
came to my mind just before, just right when we were closing. Uh, when we
Mm-hmm.
talked about Mufti Abu Layth, about his theory
Mm.
on that Moses was basically a pharaoh, or
Yeah.
Akhenaten in Egypt. One verse that does come to mind, though, is a verse that is in Surah Al-Dukhan. I don't remember exactly which verse number it is, so forgive me for that.
Mm.
But in that verse, Allah says, وَأَوْرَثْنَاهَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل, basically speaking
Yeah.
about the kunuz and the different lands,
Yeah.
the different things that were in Egypt. Allah
Yeah.
says that
That's
He
true.
made Bani Israel inherit the land.
وورثناها بني
Yeah,
إسرائيل. Yeah.
He made Bani Israel inherit the land, inherit their treasures and all those kinds of things, which is would
Yeah.
really, it would conflict a little bit with history as we know it. That
Yeah.
because if we understand that Bani Israel, they left Egypt, so they did
Yeah.
not receive inheritance of the lands and the treasures and all that, and all that
Yeah.
many things. You know,
Yeah. It's actually mentioned more than once, isn't it?
yeah,
وورثنا القوم الذين كانوا يستضعفون مشارق الأرض ومغاربها التي
exactly. Yeah,
باركنا
that one
فيها.
too.
There's that one as well.
Yeah, there's that
Uh,
one too. You know,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a
And
lot to
there's another.
contemplate.
There's another one. I think there's another one.
Mm.
There's also, what is the other one? There's the one which you mentioned in Surah Dukhan. How does that go? كذلك
Yeah, yeah,
وورثناها قوما
exactly.
آخرين. Yeah.
كذلك وأورثناها
Uh,
بني إسرائيل.
yeah.
So yeah, that's the one.
فما بكت عليهم السماء والأرض وما كانوا منظرين. I
منظرين.
think.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
Um,
I remember
yeah.
reading that and I was wondering, like, okay, I mean that would, I mean, the understanding, the presupposition that you have about Bani Israel,
Yeah.
them not having inherited the
Yeah.
land of Egypt, they actually left it, but then yet
Mm.
Allah is saying that He made them inherit. And also that
Yeah.
one that you mentioned, that He made them inherit the east and the west and all that. Maybe it's
Yeah.
talking about later, at the time of Solomon, but also when you look at archaeology, for example, Suleiman and David, they didn't. There's the reason why there's no evidence for their kingdoms existing is because
Mm.
scholars say that their kingdoms were much smaller. I mean, they certainly did not conquer the east and the west.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't at the level of Persia
Yeah.
or the Greek or
Yeah,
Roman Empire. They
there's a
weren't.
lot. I mean, yeah, but
Yeah.
there's a lot which is missing exactly when you talk about that. And
Mm.
sorry,
No, that's okay.
So what was the verse? There's the one which is in another one.
Do you remember the surah?
That's it. وإنهم إن هؤلاء لشرذمة قليلون
Yeah, that
وإنهم
one.
لنا لغائظون وإنا
Yeah.
لجميع حاذرون فأخرجناهم من جنات وعيون.
عيون. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. وكنوز ومقام كريم
Mhm.
كذلك وأورثناها بني
بني
إسرائيل.
إسرائيل. Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
that's
was
right.
wondering, like, what?
But even that verse is strange because on the next verse, which always struck me about that one, كذلك وورثناها بني إسرائيل. The next verse is فأتبعوهم مشرقين, right?
Mhm.
فأتبعوهم مشرقين. But then they were chased by. This is in Surah Al-Shura.
Yeah, that one is
They were
Surah
chased.
Al-Shu'ara.
Yeah. They were then chased. They were chased
Yeah.
afterwards. It seems
Mhm.
like they inherited that, and then they were chased afterwards
Yeah.
by Firaun. So
Yeah.
there's that as well.
Yeah, it's
No, but there's, I mean, also Qarun, the idea that there was one of the Qawm of Musa, right,
Mhm.
who had a huge amount of
Yeah, of gold,
of
of treasure.
wealth,
Yeah.
right? So who are where is that found? Where somebody who's even the keys to his treasures
Yeah.
were so
We're too
heavy,
heavy for a group
or
of
were very
people.
heavy.
Yeah.
Exactly. So who are these? So going back to Aladdin, I mean, Aladdin has a lot of. He messaged me with a few ideas as well,
Mm.
an email, a lot
Mm.
of ideas about Bani Israel, which maybe I should look more deeply into them.
Into them. Yeah.
But he has a lot of. I mean, maybe Aladdin, if you could maybe one time come on
Yeah.
and explain to us a lot more about, because he has some very interesting ideas about Egypt
Mm.
and
Yeah. Then there seems to be a
even
certain
when it
a small level of
comes to
conflict there, but
Adam alayhi salam and things like that.
Walaikum salam wa
Interesting, incredibly interesting. All right, let me just have a look. Oh, no, okay. Yeah, alaikum salam. Thank you again so much for coming on, Rashid,
yes,
and
you're
hopefully
very
see you
welcome.
again soon. Let me just Jazakallah khair. So let me just have a look. Yeah, I think he was. Here we have Aladdin saying, "How do you understand 51:24 the words Salim, Saliman, and Salimun?" You'll have to write them in Arabic. I'm not sure which words you mean. 51:25. Let me just search that. 51:25. إذ دخلوا عليه فقالوا سلاما قال سلام قوم منكرون. I think I mean, I understand it the normal way, I suppose. What would be the normal way is that they entered upon him and they said salama. They said peace. We're here in peace, and he said salam, peace to you as well. And it says qawmun munkarun. That seems to be a sort of like a subtext where he's thinking to himself, these are strange people, قوم منكرون, people who he doesn't know, right? نكروا لها عرشها, so that she wouldn't know it was her arsh, right? In the story of Suleiman and the queen of, she won't know nothing. So it seems he says salam, and he says to himself, قوم منكرون. These are people who I don't know. They seem like I don't know them. That's how I generally think about that. Yeah, I think Adam was the sign for mankind to see the following. Shaitan only causes suffering and disgrace. Some talk about the whole Adam being chosen from existing humans. There's also a possibility. You see, that's the thing about in the Quran. I mean, here we've spent a lot of time talking about the history and stuff like this, but the Quran is very, very difficult to pin down with history in terms of like in a way which closes all arguments. You know what I mean? Where we say, okay, this is the history. We take no, okay, there are illusions, and different people can have different insights, and you can interpret things in different ways. But it really goes above the history. Um, can we get the absolute accurate 100%, especially the ancient history? You know, when talking about Ben Israel or Adam alayhi salam, can we know exactly what is meant in this? It's sort of like this seems to be on purpose. The Quran sort of refuses to let itself be tied down to one thing. Uh, and maybe that's a good thing. When you're tied down, you're a target, right? You can be struck down. And the Quran, in that way, maybe it's difficult to strike down, and it, in that way also transcends above those stories and above those times and above that history, to give us the message that it's trying to give through those stories. From Adam, I think it's clear. Yeah, but I keep going back to Adam's event and asking myself, who are those who created corruptions on the earth before Adam? Why angels compare them with one another? Yeah, exactly. That's what they say, right? The traditional idea is that there were jinn already on the earth, and they are what the angels were comparing. But why the occurrence of peace? Um, but why accusative for if they say peace? I think it's just a way of you can just have that greeting. I mean, you could say salamun alaikum, we just salaman, right? That's one way. That's a legitimate way of greeting. Salaman. Um, doesn't have to be. That has to be a very different thing. Let me just have a look at a few more comments before we wrap this up. Assalamu alaikum. In the Quran, in regards to marriage, why it's mentioned not to marry, to not marry mothers, isn't it very strange? Well, no, it's strange, but strange things have happened. That's why this has happened where there have been things where they've even if it's just like as a contract, as in to marry, just as sexual relationship or anything going on between them. There have been this used to happen among the Arabs, um, where they would marry mothers sometimes. Yep, we need to read between logic and things and see the logic. Yeah, please refer special investigation. Yeah, but Ibrahim said in the nominative. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Like to be honest, like I said, salamun, salamun. Maybe it means by that salamun alayna ajma'in. I'm not sure. I mean, what's your idea about that? If you have Al-Adi, what's your idea about the difference between salamun and salamun and salamun? Like type that out quickly for us before we end, and see what you mean by that. What is the difference between salam and salamun? What will the next? You mean the next stream? What will it be about? I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't really plan these very far in front. I just think of what I want to discuss in the upcoming one during the week or even on the same day. Um, if all else fails, I have sort of like a lot of notes on my Evernote app of different things I've been contemplating in the Quran. And again, the purpose of this is really just to encourage other people to, um, to come on and share their thoughts. I'm not really trying to teach anything here. Um, or trying to like, I don't have a roadmap ahead of me for this. I think they asked a question with salamun and he answered possessive with salamun. I don't think salamun is salute. Okay, what's the question then? Is the question can we have peace, or does it have, do both words have relation to peace in your view, Aladdin? So they asked a question and he replied, but what was the question? What was the reply? Allah's names is a topic. Again, I mean, I'm just anybody who wants to come on, you're more than welcome to do any topic. But I know some people have asked me, to speak about this or speak about that. But remember, this is to share what you yourself have contemplated on. So I'm just sharing the things which I have given some thought to. Um, Having sort of like a request, thinking not everybody will be able to, there are things in the Quran which you're not going to be able to yourself contemplate for because they're not for you, the things which are in the Quran which are not for you, they're for somebody else, right? Somebody else is better suited to them, their mentality, so to speak. Those verses fit more for them. So it's I don't recommend sort of like trying to force yourself in a certain way into things. So I mean, of course, the names of God, I have thought about them, but that's not the thing which has often caught my ideas and my attention while reading the Quran. To be honest, I think so. Chilling in my people was used only when entering some house, not as a street. All right. All right. Okay. So I mean, please share it. Maybe put it in the comment section to this video, and Adin, your ideas about both about the difference between Israel and Yaqub, and about the difference between Bani Israel and the Jews or the Yahud, and also maybe this what you're trying to get across to us now about Salam and Salamun, because I'm not quite getting it. Okay. A comment about food. That's good. Let's end with that. Turkish food is really good when fresh cooked when eaten with a bunch of people. All right, okay, guys. I think what I'll do is we'll end this there. All right, yeah, exactly, yeah. I'll try to comment about diet in the comments. Yes, please do, and inshallah, we'll have a read of them. We'll come and check back the comments in a few days. For everybody else, for me, of course, I'll get notifications, so I'll see it. And yes, we'll get a bit more about what you're saying there. We'll end the stream there. Thank you a lot, everybody. Jazakallahu khair. And inshallah, I'll be able to see you again next week. If you haven't caught my previous video, I made the reason why we're doing the stream today. Yesterday, I was doing a video and also New Year's and stuff, so I wanted to delay it. So I finished that video yesterday, uploaded it. But I'm also thinking that maybe now we could switch it up and have the streams regularly on Sundays today. What I'll do is I'll make a poll about that. I think I can do that in YouTube. So I'll make a community post or poll, and I'll ask if you guys would prefer for the stream to continue on Sunday or on Saturday. If it's even, then maybe I will make it just on Sunday, just because maybe up to now there have been people who have wanted to come along, but they haven't because Saturday they are working. So maybe it's good now to switch it up and make the the streams regularly on Sunday. Maybe people who couldn't make it on Saturday will now be able to join us. We'll see. You're welcome, of course, more than welcome. And again, thank you to all of you. And I'll end it there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.